You're too old to help. That's what my daughter Danielle said to me. She didn't even look up from her phone when she said it just sat at the kitchen island scrolling as if she were picking a lunch order, not cutting her own mother out of her life. I stood there, holding a dish towel, my hands still damp from wiping down the counters. Just minutes earlier, I had folded a basket of her baby's laundry and grilled cheese sandwiches for her kids, Noah and Ella. I was still wearing my old slippers. I remember staring at her, not saying a word at first. My throat tightened up like someone had tugged a string inside me and wouldn't let go. I looked at her, this grown woman, who I once rocked to sleep during summer thunderstorms, who used to cry if I left her at daycare too soon. I helped her through her divorce, co-signed her student loans, paid off her first car. And now she wouldn't even meet my eyes. It's nothing personal, she added casually, giving a half-hearted shrug. You've been great, really. But Liam and I feel like it's time for a shift. You know. A shift, like all I had done the past 3 years, cooking, cleaning, early morning school prep, bedtime stories, baking cupcakes for class parties, staying up when Ella had a fever, could just be shifted out. Like I was a piece of furniture they were moving to the garage. I nodded, and I smiled. That smile I've used for years, the one that says, "Of course I understand, even when I don't, even when something inside me is splintering." I walked out of the kitchen, slowly back to the guest bedroom. That's what we called it now. My space, not part of the home, just a room. Not our house, not Grandma's room, just a corner for me to be quiet in. And somewhere on that walk down the hallway, something inside me quietly changed. It wasn't a loud moment. No yelling, no sobbing. Just a shift. A door inside me that had been left cracked open for years finally clicked shut. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the baby monitor still sitting on my nightstand. I kept it there, even though I wasn't really needed anymore. Watching over them had become second nature. But as I looked at that soft, blinking light, I realized something so sharp and undeniable I wasn't wanted. Not really. I was familiar. I was functional. But in Danielle's eyes, I had become like an old lamp, comforting in the corner but easy to unplug. And it hit me not in an angry way, but in a hollow one, that this wasn't just about today. This had been building for a while. The way Danielle stopped saying thank you. How she started phrasing things like tasks. Can you do pickup at 3 instead of, would you mind? Or how she left the house without even saying goodbye sometimes, like I was part of the wallpaper. 3 years ago, when Alan died, the house we shared became too quiet for me to bear. Danielle had just bought her new place and offered me the guest suite. "It makes sense, Mum," she said, flipping through her floor plans. "You'll be helping with the kids. It's a win-win." And it did make sense. I needed to feel useful. I needed something to hold on to. Being part of her home made me feel like I was part of something bigger than my grief. But now here I was, not needed, not included, not asked, just there, until they could figure out how to move me out entirely. And that sentence she dropped so casually, like she was talking about rearranging furniture, was the first crack before everything really started to fall apart. After that conversation with Danielle, things didn't explode. There was no big fight, no dramatic exit. Just small things, quiet, polite, gradual, that began to change. And I started to notice them all at once. It was like someone dimming the lights in a room so slowly you barely realize it's getting dark. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw the corkboard calendar had been taken down. That board had been my command centre for the kids' soccer practices, dentist appointments, school holidays. Danielle used to forward me her schedule, and I'd build my day around it to make sure everything ran smoothly. In its place was a sleek digital tablet, mounted high on the wall, colour-coded password locked and completely out of reach. I asked her casually if she could show me how to use it. She didn't even look up from her laptop. "It's okay, Mum. We've got it now. We've got it now." It stung more than I expected, like they had moved on and forgotten to take me with them. Then came the nanny. Her name was Risa. Young, cheerful, well-dressed, she looked like someone from a Pinterest board. I didn't even know she'd been hired. I walked into the living room one morning, and there she was, building a block tower with Ella, like she'd always belonged there. Danielle came down the stairs in heels, dressed for work, and said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you this is Risa. She's here to help out." I smiled and asked help with what's still trying to keep my voice light. Danielle replied, "Pickups, drop-offs a few afternoons a week. Figured it might give you a break." A break? I never asked for a break. I didn't want a break. But what was I supposed to say? I offered to show Risa how Ella liked her bedtime stories, how Noah liked his waffles a little crisp around the edges. Danielle waved me off. She's a professional mum. Let her figure it out. That one hit hard. I'd spent 3 years learning the rhythm of those kids, their quirks, their meltdowns, their joys. I had poured myself into their days like water into a mold. And now I was being told to step aside. Just like that. After Risa started coming around, things really shifted. My mornings were quiet, no more pancakes, no more backpacks by the door, no more little voices calling Grandma as I handed them their lunch boxes. I still lived under their roof, but I wasn't part of their rhythm anymore. I became like a background character in my own life. The kitchen didn't need me. The laundry didn't need me. Danielle stopped checking in, stopped asking if I'd be around. I was still folding laundry, still organising the pantry, still making sure the hand soap was full in the bathrooms. But no one noticed. No one said thank you. I had become invisible in the house I once helped feel like a home. The hardest part was the way Danielle talked to me. It wasn't mean, not exactly, but it was sharp-clipped, impersonal. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to Liam in the kitchen. She didn't know I was folding towels in the hallway. She means well, she said, but honestly, she's kind of slipping. She let Ella nap at 4 again. I just don't think she's as capable as she used to be. Capable. Not loving. Not supportive. Just capable. As if I were some piece of machinery that wasn't working as well as it used to. Liam didn't say much, just gave a little grunt in response. And I stood there with a towel in my hands, frozen. It was the first time I asked myself a question. I never thought I'd have to, am I a burden? After that, I started hearing that word capable in every interaction. It came in different versions. You don't have to worry about that, Mom, or we've got it covered. It was always polite, always wrapped in a smile. But it cut deeper than anything Danielle had said before. Because that was the moment I stopped feeling like family. I didn't even feel like a guest. I felt like a leftover, someone they didn't know what to do with, so they quietly moved me to the side. And worst of all, I let them. Because I didn't know where else to go. It wasn't one big moment that pushed me out. It was 100 small ones. Tiny shifts. quiet replacements. Like one of those scenes in a movie where the main character fades from the picture frame by frame while everyone else keeps moving. That's exactly what it felt like. I was still physically there, still breathing under their roof, still folding towels and restocking the pantry. But it was like I had turned into wallpaper, familiar but unremarkable, something you walk past without noticing. It really hit me one Saturday afternoon during one of Danielle's so-called networking brunches. She called them that, but really they were backyard barbecues with her work friends, sleek sunglasses, maxi dresses, holding wine glasses in one hand and their phones in the other, while their kids ran wild in the yard. I had always helped with those. Quietly behind the scenes, I'd prep the fruit trays, arrange the crackers, make sure the juice boxes were chilled. It was my way of contributing, of still being part of things. That day, I was in the kitchen slicing strawberries just like I always had. Danielle appeared in the doorway with a breezy tone and a forced smile. "You don't need to do that, Mum. Riza's handling the food." "I don't mind," I said, still holding the knife, trying to keep my voice even. I know how picky Noah can be. "She's got it," Danielle said again, sharper this time, as if I hadn't heard her the first time. So I stepped aside. I sat on the patio by myself, while Riza passed out the snacks, and the other mums laughed and swapped weekend plans. No one asked me to join their conversations. No one even made eye contact. I wasn't angry, I was just tired. Tired in a way that settled into my bones. Even Noah looked confused that morning when I didn't take him to the park like I usually did. "Why aren't you coming, Grandma?" he asked, his little brow furrowed. I didn't know what to say. Just a change in plans, sweetheart. Later that evening, I set the table for 4, like I always had, placing the napkins neatly beside each plate, like I'd done hundreds of times before. Danielle came downstairs grabbing her keys and said almost in passing, "Oh, we're eating out." "Riza's coming too? You don't have to wait up." And that was it. No invitation. No, "Do you want to come?" Just the door closing behind her while I stood there holding a dinner plate in my hands. That's when I knew. There wasn't going to be a big moment. No blow-up. No "thank you for everything, goodbye." Just a slow, silent fade into the background. 1,000 tiny decisions that all pointed to the same truth: I wasn't part of their life anymore. Not really. I still did little things, washed the kids' stuffed animals when they weren't looking refilled. The hand soap changed the batteries in the smoke detector, but no one noticed. No one thanked me. I wasn't a grandmother anymore. I was a ghost with good timing. That's the part that hurt the most. Not that they let me go, but that they didn't even realize they had. And for the first time, I finally faced the truth: I wasn't staying because I was needed. I was staying because I didn't know where else to go until that moment. Because after that night, I knew something had to change. And this time, the change would come from me. I moved out without a big conversation. No bags by the door, no teary goodbye, no send-off with hugs from the kids. Danielle didn't ask why or press for details. I found a small one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the quieter side of town. The stairs creaked. The walls were thin. The place always smelled faintly of detergent and hot metal, but it was mine. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, and moved in within a week. I left behind the baby monitor, the little routines, the shared dinners, though in truth those had stopped a long time ago. The first night I slept there, I didn't even unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed in my coat, staring at the blank walls and unopened boxes. The silence was too heavy to think through, too full of questions I couldn't answer. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry. I was just blank. Like someone had wiped my life clean and forgotten to leave me a note explaining what came next. In the morning, I made coffee in the tiny kitchen, just enough for 1 cup, and sat by the window watching people pass below. I tried to keep a routine like those grief books suggest. Wake up early, make the bed, go outside. So I did. I took slow walks around the block, browsed the aisles of the grocery store, even when I didn't need anything, just to see people. I'd stand there reading soup labels or watching couples argue over which pasta to buy. No one noticed me. No one smiled. I could have disappeared right there in the produce aisle and no one would have known. Some nights I'd open one of the moving boxes thinking I'd finally start unpacking. I never did much. Mostly I just sat and looked through old things, faded birthday cards, Ella's drawings photos from when Alan was still alive. I missed him more in that little apartment than I had even right after he passed. Back then, at least I had distractions. Danielle needed help. The kids needed lunches. I had tasks, and those tasks gave me purpose. But now, with no one to take care of, no one expecting anything, I felt weightless. Not in a good way. More like a balloon with the string cut. One afternoon, I came across a photo of Alan and me from a trip we took to Lake George. I was in a bathing suit, tanned and laughing, my hair windswept and messy. He had his arm around me, both of us squinting into the sun. I didn't recognize the woman in that photo. She looked like someone who knew exactly where she belonged. I touched the edge of the picture and whispered, "Where did she go?" There were moments, especially in the early days, when I'd pick up my phone and almost text Danielle. Not to ask for anything, just to say hello. Maybe hear the kids' voices. But then I'd remember the way she looked right through me in that kitchen, the way she shrugged me off like a mild inconvenience. And I'd put the phone down again. I tried journaling once or twice. Wrote down simple things, what I had for lunch, what the weather was like, how I couldn't sleep again. One entry ended with "I feel like I've been erased." That was the truth. I didn't just lose my place in her house. I lost my place in the world I thought I still belonged to. I wasn't a mom she leaned on. I wasn't a grandmother in their daily lives. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was just Margaret. And I didn't even know who that was without everyone else around me. It was a Thursday afternoon, grey, outside the kind of day where even the light feels tired. The little radiator in the corner clicked every few minutes, doing its best to warm the apartment. I had gone through most of my boxes by then, but there was still one tucked in the back of the closet, labelled in faded black marker Alan. I hadn't opened it since the move, maybe even before that. I think I had packed it up after the funeral, sealed it with a piece of tape, and promised myself I'd go through it later. But later kept getting pushed. That day I pulled it out, sat cross-legged on the floor, and peeled back the cardboard. It smelled like time-old paper, a trace of his cologne dust. Inside were anniversary cards, a few dried flowers I'd forgotten I saved, and Polaroids from our last trip to Montana just weeks before his heart gave out. I didn't cry. I just sat with it, all touching the edges of what used to be. And then I found it a plain envelope, marked in my handwriting, "Do not throw away. Check later." Inside were folded notes, a few faded receipts, and near the bottom, a crumpled lottery ticket. I actually laughed. Alan used to buy one every month, always saying it was for the dream. It wasn't about winning. It was his little ritual. Just imagine he'd grin, holding up the ticket we win big, I buy you a villa in Tuscany. I'd roll my eyes and say I'd settle for a dishwasher that doesn't leak. We never took it seriously. It was just a joke between us. A little fantasy to keep things light. After he died, I must have found this one in the glove compartment and tucked it away without thinking. But now, with nothing else to do, I opened my phone and typed in the Powerball results from the date printed on the ticket February 4th, 3 years ago. I read the numbers once, then again, then 10 more times. 26, 37, 41, 55, 63, Powerball 18. Every single number matched. I stared at the screen, then back at the ticket. I thought surely I'd made a mistake. Wrong date, wrong draw, some cruel twist. But no, it was real. I was holding a $3.7 million winning ticket, still valid for just under 3 weeks before it would expire. I sat there for a long time, the ticket in my heart pounding like I'd run up a flight of stairs. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something else, like the world had tilted slightly back into place, like someone had whispered, "You are not finished, Margaret." And for the first time in a long, long while, I actually believed it. I didn't tell anyone. Not Danielle, not my sister in Oregon, not even Joyce, the kind woman next door who brought me soup on Mondays. This wasn't about anyone else. It wasn't even really about the money. It was about having something that was just mine. Something that reminded me I could still choose, still act, still be the one at the wheel of my own life. I called the lottery office hands, shaking. A woman answered with a tired but polite voice. "Yes, ma'am. If you're the ticket holder, you'll need to bring it in person. Valid ID. Still valid for another 19 days. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, not the kind of crying I did after Alan died, or after Danielle edged me out of her life. This time it wasn't grief. It was relief. Like I was letting go of a breath I'd been holding for years. I booked a bus ticket to the city the next morning. I made 3 photocopies of the ticket and sealed the original in a plastic sleeve. I checked that folder every hour, like it might disappear. At the lottery office, it was weirdly mundane forms, ID checks, a lukewarm cup of water from the security guard. When they confirmed it, I felt strangely calm. "You can take it in annual payments or lump sum," the man said. "Lump sum," I replied without even thinking. That was the moment everything changed. I walked outside the spring air, cool and sharp. Cars still honked. People still bustled past me. But inside I felt solid. I wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. And I knew exactly where I was going next. 3 weeks later, I was standing in front of a small stone building in Florence, Italy suitcase, in hand, heart strangely calm. The ivy climbed around the windows, a few flower pots lined the second-floor balcony, and from somewhere nearby came the smell of espresso and fresh bread. I hadn't told anyone I was leaving the country, not Danielle, not my sister, not the neighbours who nodded at me each morning. This wasn't a vacation. It wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something just for me. The apartment was modest. 1 bedroom, a tiny galley kitchen, a living room with a little table that looked out over the cobbled street. The floors creaked and the shower had its quirks, but I loved it immediately. Every morning I opened the windows wide and breathed in the air, warm, rich, alive. The kind of air that made you feel like something good was just around the corner. I started walking everywhere. I didn't need a plan. Florence has a way of revealing itself if you let it. I found a small cafe on the corner where the barista remembered my name after just 2 visits. I signed up for a watercolour class at a local studio where no one spoke English fluently, but everyone communicated just fine with nods and smiles. I bought a sketchbook and began drawing again, buildings, fountains, faces. Not because I was good at it, but because it made me feel present. There was no grand makeover. I didn't dye my hair or join a yoga retreat. I still woke up early, still brewed coffee just the way I liked it, still missed the smell of my old laundry detergent sometimes. But something inside me had settled. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for a phone call, not for a thank you, not to be asked back in. I had spent so many years being what others needed that I had forgotten what I needed. And here in this quiet little apartment above a bakery, I started to remember. I thought about Noah and Ella every day. The kids, my sweet ones. I missed them more than I could say. Not just their little hands or their bedtime stories, but the way they looked at me like I was their whole world. That kind of love doesn't fade easily. But I didn't miss Danielle. I thought I might, but I didn't. I didn't miss her clipped tone or the way she avoided eye contact, or the way I never quite knew if I was welcome. What I missed truly deeply was who I used to be when I felt needed, loved part of something. And I wasn't willing to spend the rest of my life begging to feel that again. So I wrote letters not to Danielle but to the children. Letters full of memories, stories, little bits of advice. I knew they wouldn't read them now, but maybe someday they would. Someday they'd understand that I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I finally started loving myself. One morning, sitting at the cafe with a croissant and my sketch pad, the sunlight warmed the tops of the terracotta roofs across the street. A couple nearby argued gently over directions, and a dog barked down the alley. Life was still messy and noisy and imperfect. But I wasn't watching it from behind a window or waiting for permission to join. I was in it, fully, quietly, on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The first message came on a Tuesday morning as I was sipping espresso on the terrace. It was short, just 3 words. "You doing okay?" I stared at it for a long moment, then put the phone down. I didn't reply. The next day came a voicemail. "Hey, just checking in. The kids miss you. Maybe we could FaceTime sometime." Again, I let it go to voicemail. It wasn't out of anger or spite. I wasn't trying to punish Danielle. I just didn't owe her my attention anymore. For so long I had waited for scraps for a thank you, a look, a sign that I still mattered. And now, finally, I didn't need that validation. I was fine. More than fine. I was free. A few days later came the message that made everything clear. I called a lawyer. "You can't just disappear, Mom. We need to talk about your estate." And there it was. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "I miss you." Not, "I'm sorry." Just concern over paperwork. The irony almost made me laugh. She hadn't asked where I was, hadn't asked how I was managing, hadn't once offered an apology. But now that the money was real, now that I had left quietly and firmly, she was rattled. That night I called Mr. Sanford, my attorney, back in Boston. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Danielle," I said. He paused. "Are you sure you don't have to?" "I want to," I said. but only on my terms. Quiet, clear, no drama. The following week I flew back. No announcement, no warning. Just me and a black carry-on. I didn't call her. I didn't stay with anyone. I booked a small hotel room near the law office and wore my favourite blouse to the meeting, the one Alan used to say made me look like I owned the world. Danielle walked into the office 10 minutes late, flustered, clutching her designer bag like a shield. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "what is going on?" I didn't stand. I didn't reach for her. "You told me to find my own space," I said calmly. "You told me I was too old to help. You asked me to leave, so I did." She blinked, sat down. Her eyes went to Mr. Sanford, who slid a folder across the table. "This is the updated structure of the estate," he said. She opened it and scanned. Her voice cracked slightly. "You're leaving everything to the kids? And nothing to me?" "No," I said softly. "Nothing to you. You're my mother." "And you were my daughter," I said. "But you chose otherwise." She didn't cry, not right away. Her face went stiff like porcelain about to crack. "I never meant to hurt you. I know," I replied. "That's what makes it worse." I stood, smoothed my blouse. "I didn't come here to argue. I'm not angry, Danielle. I'm just done." Mr. Sanford handed her the final documents. She didn't reach for them. As I walked to the door, she said behind me, "So that's it." I paused, hand on the frame. That's it. There was no yelling, no accusations, just the sound of a chapter closing. And I didn't look back. A few days later, I was back in Florence, back to warm bread in the mornings and watercolour classes in the afternoon. I walked along the Arno with the sun on my shoulders and a peace I had never quite known. That meeting wasn't revenge. It was release. I didn't need to win anything. I just needed to speak my truth. And I had. Danielle had taken me for granted for years. But when she finally reached out, she learned I wasn't the same woman she once dismissed. I was stronger, quieter, and completely out of her reach. It was a Tuesday morning when the first letter arrived. I found it slid under my door in Florence, tucked into a cream-coloured envelope with no return address. My name was written across the front, in big, uneven handwriting, clearly from a child. Inside was a crayon drawing, a red house, a yellow sun, 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, and one with long silver hair. Above them, in blue letters, were the words, "We miss you, Grandma." It was signed Noah and Ella. My breath caught. On the back of the page was a small note in Danielle's handwriting. "I didn't tell them why you left. I just said you were on a big adventure. They ask about you every week. I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear from us, but the kids insisted." There was no apology, no grand gesture, just a quiet offering. Still, it stirred something in me I hadn't felt in a while. Not forgiveness, but something gentler. A door creaking open, not wide, but enough to let light in. That evening, I sat at my little writing desk by the window and pulled out the letters I'd written months earlier to Noah and Ella. I had tucked them away in case I ever felt it was the right time. I read them again, made a few edits, then wrote a new one. "Dear Noah and Ella, I got your drawing today. I especially loved the silver hair, very accurate. Tell Ella I still remember her story about the rabbit with yellow boots. One day I'll read her the Italian version. Be good, be kind, and always know your grandma loves you more than all the stars." With all my heart, Grandma Margaret, I included 2 pressed flower petals from the garden outside my building. It was the first time in months that I mailed something with hope instead of hurt. A week later, another letter arrived. This time it was from Danielle. "Mum, I read your note to the kids. Thank you. I know I've made mistakes, a lot of them. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you might let me try again, even if it's just as a visitor in your life. Not as your daughter asking for anything, just as a woman who finally sees her mother for who she really is." I didn't cry. Not because it didn't move me, but because I no longer needed her words to give mine meaning. Still, I recognized something in her tone I hadn't heard in a long time: humility. So a few days later, I sent a simple reply. "Danielle, you may come as my guest. Bring only kindness. Leave expectations behind. Margaret, I didn't open the door all the way, but I left it unlocked. Not for reconciliation, but for respect." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the terracotta rooftops of Florence, I sat alone at my favourite cafe espresso in hand sketch pad open. People passed by in slow, thoughtful movements. A child laughed at pigeons by the fountain. Life hummed, and I was part of it, not waiting, not watching. Living. I wasn't the same woman who once begged to be seen, who tried to earn love through usefulness. I had let go of needing to be chosen, because finally I had chosen myself, and that was enough. More than enough. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is choosing yourself. This story reminds us that our worth isn't tied to how useful we are to others or how much we give without being asked. As we age, many of us find ourselves quietly stepping aside, hoping to stay needed, to stay visible. But the truth is, we don't have to prove our value by constantly sacrificing our peace. Like Margaret, we may one day realize that the roles we poured ourselves into no longer define us. And that's okay. What matters most is that we still have the power to begin again, even if it's in a new place, with new dreams, and a quieter kind of joy. We can learn to live not for approval or obligation, but for the simple beauty of a morning coffee, a handwritten letter, or the courage to reclaim our space. This story is a gentle reminder that it's never too late to rewrite your life, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. If this touched your heart, let us know in the comments what kinds of stories you'd love to hear next. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next heartfelt episode. Until then, take care of your heart and remember, you are never too old to begin again.